Hey, right now on episode 107 of The Flip Side,
I'm going to tell you why you should watch the Netflix show, The Crown.
and I'm going to tell you why the most deeply spiritual thing you can do is go to bed on time and eat something green. Right now on The Flip Side. Hello and welcome to Flip Side, episode 107. And I've got Andrew McCourt, everyone. Andrew McCourt.
Wow, good to be here, Kurt, on episode 107.
That's right. All of Europe and every bit of North America wants you every week on every single podcast. And we've got you here, my partner in crime, my co-pastor at the Granite Bay campus. And like I tell our church every other week, one of my favorite communicators and theologians in the whole world. And we're in Acts chapter 27, the storm chapter.
Wow, I feel something brewing.
There is. Oh, that's very good.
Did you see what I...
Miss Haley, come on in here and serve us some coffee here for the storm episode. And it has kind of shifted to fall weather here in Northern California. We've got a...
Yeah.
It's not Ireland a wee nip in the air. It's more like it's gone from 85 degrees to 75.
Yeah.
But it's a little fall.
No, it's nice.
Sorry for your Seahawks this last week.
Oh, thank you, Haley. Thanks
We
for
had to
bringing
bring
it
up
up.
the football, you know?
Okay.
Maybe this coffee will make up for it. This is a blend from Stumptown Coffee. It's their homestead blend. So you'll taste some candied milk chocolate flavors. So I'm guessing Central America, but you guys decide. And if you want to drink what they're drinking, check out the show notes. We've included a link to the beans.
Oh, very good.
I like that. I like that.
Great.
They're working hard for you guys.
Candy chocolate, getting us ready for Christmas.
I do taste the chocolate, and I want to say, Russell Wilson, I know you watch The Flip Side. I'm praying for you, bro. Okay, so let's get right into it. Just give a little context of this chapter. Luke is writing a lot about the city-to-city aspect of Paul's outreach in the book of Acts. So they go to this city, they preach to the Jews, they preach to the Gentiles, and then revival breaks out. They go to this city, they preach to the Jews, they preach to the Gentiles, a riot breaks out, and he's over and over again. And then all of a sudden you get this pattern where Luke spends a lot of time on the storm. And my question just, Andrew, to you, just from a theologian's point of view, from a Bible teacher's point of view, it's like at one point Luke goes, and then we spend another 2 years in that city. And we get no details. Half a verse, we spend another 2 years in that city. No details. And then all of a sudden, this 2-week episode, we get the direction of the winds, the shipping philosophy of people going into winter shipping time, the type of cargo. We learn about centurions and how that they, every single detail is in there. God visits Paul. We learn all about that. Paul's response about it, Paul's leadership. I mean, he goes super detailed. Why does Luke shift? Why do we go from this city to city pattern to this in-depth, full-on weather channel in Acts chapter 27?
I think it's simply put in, Kurt, for every parent out there that knows there are going to be horrible road trips in the future with children. I think
this is God looking down and saying, the car seats in the minivan, you're going to need Acts chapter 27.
Yeah, and don't forget to bring those DVDs and extra, fish food and whatever. This is rough.
Fish food. By that you mean the fish crackers?
Fish crackers, yeah,
yes.
Not fish food. Because now maybe you got the fish in the car. I don't know. But he's basically saying, do you know what? I think this is what it comes down to, is that Luke was a doctor. He does like details. Now, don't forget as well,
that's right,
that in obviously in his gospel, he gives us way more detail on the birth of Jesus, the whole narrative, because he's a doctor and he likes that sort of stuff.
Yes.
We get an insight into the childhood of Jesus. He's the only one that records anything from birth to 30, he puts in. So I think he likes detail, obviously inspired by the Holy Spirit. And I think it goes back to the beginning of both Luke and Acts, where he tells Theophilus, I try to make an accurate record of everything that happened. And I think he put this in because he just goes, hey, if you really want to know Paul, if you want to understand our mission, you need to understand that he went through some tough times, really tough times.
Right.
And I think Paul as well, he refers to some of this when I think he says in 2 Corinthians, he talks about being shipwrecked 3 times. So he had an absolute Titanic anointing.
Yes,
I would never have got in a ship with Paul.
Leonardo DiCaprio of New Testament.
Quite
literature.
literally, if you saw Paul go on a ship, you got that sinking feeling. Excuse the pun.
That was very good. That was very, very good. Well, obviously, as our friend Chris Brown says, the way God treats them is the way God treats us. So, I mean, your first explanation is brilliant because it really is true. We're all going to go through storms, whether it's parenting, pick your storm, or COVID, or cultural chaos. This is inspired by the Holy Spirit, a roadmap to navigating a storm. What's interesting in here is how calm Paul stays. We're getting ready to do a study on the book of Jonah.
Oh, wow.
And I've never put these two together. It's just kind of fortuitous, sovereign that we're studying the closeout of Acts here and the beginning our study in Jonah, because Jonah goes through a storm running away from God. Paul goes through a storm running into the plan of God.
It's good, yeah.
Jonah goes grumpily and at great cost. Paul stays calm, cool, has incredible leadership. There's a beautiful symmetry in here going, the point is not get into God's will and you want to have a storm. The point is there's a way to handle a storm, and you can handle it a Jonah way or you can handle it an Apostle Paul way.
Yeah.
And I got to bring out this detail, and I'll probably spend too much time on this. What strikes me about this, and I've been preaching this for 30 years, 2 different times Paul gets up and he gives the Braveheart speech. 2 different times he stands up, he goes, it's 2 weeks of storms. We haven't seen the sun, haven't seen the moon, haven't seen the stars. It's clouds, it's rain. We don't know what day or night is. And he says, but God has promised me. God has promised me. And if you'll latch on to God's promise, not a single hair on your head will be lost. Trust in my God. You're going to be fine. And there's an and in both speech. Get something to eat.
Yeah.
Eat something. What is the deal with the eating? I wouldn't when the Braveheart speech happens in the movie, remember the Titans?
Yeah.
They don't go, and they'll remember where the Titans, and today freedom, and by the way, have a nice biscuit. It's not a thing that happens in the movies, yet here in the passage it happens. What's your take on it?
Well, I don't think there's any big theological significance. I don't think we can go, well, what he was talking about here was manna in the wilderness, and he brought out the jar that used to be in the ark. I don't think that's what he was saying. But I do think it is deeply theological because it's all about how we're made. 1 Thessalonians 5:23, we are spirit, we are soul, we are body, we are spiritual, we're psychological, and we're physical. And the physical side of who we are is really important. And I know that in life, I get hangry. I mean, I try to be the best Christian I can, but when I get hungry, you're going to hear from me. I'm going to be on edge. And
I'm so tempted to give him inside baseball about our real process around here. You have these little Madeleines.
Oh, yeah, Madeleines. Oh, my goodness, everybody.
I never even knew what they were until we started working together. Some of the greatest leadership I've seen out of any leader is after you eat a Madeleine.
Oh, yeah. It's so important that when that goes into me, it's like all the cogs are working again. But I think these are the moments of where we look at that. Paul says, you guys have been roughing this at sea. And if you're going to make it out of this, you actually need to take care of your body. And I think what a good lesson in this season, what a good lesson in life is that we would look at ourselves and see ourselves in those 3 parts and this part of the body, which when Paul talks about that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, he's not talking about sarx, flesh, the fleshy nature. He's talking about soma, body, soma, the gift that God has given us, that we will sow in corruption, but will reap and will rise to incorruption. So I think there's something about looking after this body is really important.
So we were talking earlier about this, and you were talking about this separation between the secular and
the
sacred. And I think the reason this passage, when Paul does this 2 different times, the reason it strikes me as odd is because I have that very Western separation mentality. I'm cultivating my spirit. I'm feeding my spirit. I'm taking care of my spirit. I'm worshiping my spirit. And I think that my spiritual response has nothing to do with whether or not I've eaten.
Yeah.
And the contradiction that happens in me here, Andrew, gets exposed when I talk to our Thrive students. So, they're all young leaders. They're 17 to 23, 24 years old. They're stressed out. There's a lot of pressure. They're leading middle school small groups. They're making Christmas happen. This is first leadership responsibility. And I frequently tell them, listen, go to bed and eat something green. Listen, here's my big spiritual talk to you as a leader, a young leader. Go to bed, eat something green, and maybe think about getting up, moving your body and sweating a little bit. And I'm going, it's not just for the young leader. All of us need to realize to be at my best spiritually, I need to get enough sleep. I need to get something to eat. And I probably need to exercise. Paul says exercise is of some benefit.
Yeah.
And to us, I don't think we put those in the same category as spiritual.
Well, I think this wrongly the separation of the sacred and the spiritual, and the secular sort of thing used to be, well, I've gone to church and now I'm going to go to work. Whereas the New Testament really talks about worship and work are the same thing. We work when we worship, and we worship when we work. They are the same thing. And I think you do the food thing so well, Kurt. I think this is actually the point where Paul went full French, because the French love their food, and he's saying, get some food into you. And I think you and I know this, we've had this in experiences with our family or with our friends, that we've been sitting down and we've had a great meal together, and sometimes in the middle of that meal, I got to be honest with you, I feel as spiritual and as connected to God as I do in a worship service with my hands, because I'm thinking, this is what I'm born to do. I'm born to be in community. I think Jesus modeled that. We called it the Last Supper, but it wasn't the only supper he had. I'm not sure if it's, we can't argue to this, but I'm sure it wasn't the only time they went to that room, that Jesus booked a nice room, had food with his disciples. And he was called a glutton. Isn't that incredible? And the party maker, and John the Baptist, something similar. Not that he was, but he was just a man of the people. He understood what it was to gather around food. And I don't want to extrapolate this too much, but I'm just thinking, food is important for our lives. Rhythms are important for our lives. And temple care is really important as we seek to serve God.
There is something about in here about when he takes the actual bread. The first time he tells them, get something to eat, they ignore him. He takes the actual bread. He thanks God for it. He's not in a panic. He's not, it's more than just the eating. He's demonstrating. He's going, listen, you can do this. He takes the bread, he eats it, and they kind of go, all right, we can eat too. They get the grain out and eat. I think it's simple, and you couldn't mix it over, and it's not the main point of the passage. But it is very profound. That simple idea of the common humanity of eating with people it's a deeply meaningful and an important thing. I'm like you. I fly fish, I golf, I preach. I love preaching. I love fly fishing. I love golfing. My favorite thing in the world to do is sit with my family and a few close friends and laugh over a meal. So now, in the midst of this, Andrew, the real thing he's doing there is he's acting courageous in the hopes that they will act courageous. And so here's my simple question for you, and I think everyone wants to know this. What's the most courageous thing you've had to do as a pastor?
Oh, my goodness. I wish I was saying to you, it was a huge capital campaign, or it was an evangelistic conference. I think one of the moments for me, Kurt, that sort of stood out was when we were back in Ireland. We had planted a church. I was a young leader. I did not know everything. I was trying my best. And we had this like fledgling community of people that were coming together. And the church had probably been about 4 years old at this point. And of course, at that point, and you know what this is like from your history in planting Chi Alpha campuses, etc., across universities, you're just, everybody counts. Everybody counts.
Yes.
You're in the trench together.
Yes.
You're counting dogs. You're counting cats. You're counting everyone.
If someone leaves the room and comes back in, you count them again.
Oh, completely. And the food thing is so important as well. You share with them, and everyone, you survive together. Well, basically, without going into too much detail, it became apparent to me, and it came to my knowledge, that someone in our community had been lying to us about something very serious. And this was a public thing in their life that we had all supported and got round. And it was just a fallacy. It was just all a lie. It was all a mask. It was all a pretense. And when I heard the news, I had my suspicions, and I pursued it, and the worst affirmation came to me that this was not true. And I was like, oh my goodness. and then having to break that to the community. And I remember that public meeting, and we called an extraordinary meeting, and people, they thought, oh, wow, this is going to be amazing. Andrew's going to announce we've got a church building.
Right, right.
And it was the opposite. And you wouldn't do that today in a church of our size and whatever. Right. But for that community, it was essential, full disclosure. Right. And I remember getting up in that meeting and just saying, hey, everyone, let me read this statement out. And when I get to the end of the statement, I'm going to take questions and I'll answer them as best I can. And I remember as I give the revelation of everything that had gone on, just there was gasps in the room. There was tears in the room. But here's the really cool thing is that through that meeting, and because we were authentic and we were honest, people embraced that more than the tragedy of the news, and actually pulled the church tighter together. We still had to work through some of the emotional fallout, but so it was a moment when I look back on it. Would I want to repeat it? No, but I'm glad we did it, and it took some courage to do it.
Almost. Courage and uncomfortable go together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's that moment when you have to speak an uncomfortable truth, a truth that is not going to win you fans in the short run, maybe in the long run for your credibility. It's funny because I was talking to someone this week and they were like, I'm so loyal and I'm a loyal person, but I'm like, you don't really put that conjunction after the word loyal. It's easy to be loyal when there's no hurt or harm. It's easy to be brave when there's no fearful circumstance. What Paul does here is so amazing because anyone can stand on the beach and have courage. Just swim. You can do it. Paul's with them here.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the first funeral I ever did, Andrew, and the problem with this funeral was I was a young minister, so I had no idea how to do a funeral. Number one. Number two, I was grieving this person. This person was close to me. And I realized, I said, you know what? There'll be a time for my grief. I shouldn't avoid that grief. But I got to be a leader right now. This family is hurting. My students are hurting. Someone has to rise above the offense and lead.
Yeah.
Paul could be so indulgent here. After everything I've done.
Yeah.
You guys still want to throw me overboard? You still don't want to believe me? After everything I've done, I'm on my way to prison here. Maybe I want this ship to wreck. Instead, he actually goes, I'm concerned about every hair on every head in this place.
Yeah.
I'm going to demonstrate that calmness. I'm going to talk you into getting something to eat. And then I'm going to calmly, absolutely warn you that if you don't stick with God, you're not going to make it. And it's just the uncomfortable, we all want to have that courage moment, but it comes with the uncomfortable moment. You can't have the courage moment without the uncomfortable moment. And the uncomfortable moment really reveals the courage. I heard this, you've probably heard this too, is someone said online, do you wonder what you would have done back in the crisis of D-Day, back in the crisis of the draft of World War II, or back in the crisis of the 1920s? You wonder what you would have done then? Well, what you're doing right now is what you would have done.
Yeah.
In this cultural crisis and in this time of division, in this time of chaos and everyone being on short tempers, we need people to stand up and go, there's a promise, and get something to eat.
Yeah.
Stick with the promise. And by the way, get off your keto for a week or so until the storm passes.
It's amazing that he looks after, as you're highlighting there, he looks after their physical needs, and then he's speaking to their emotional needs as well. I mean, it's Paul, like probably we don't really see him or know of him because we always think of Paul the writer, Paul the theologian,
right.
And that's what's impacted our lives the most. Obviously, Paul the missionary, which does demand courage. We know of Paul the apostle, one who saw the Lord on the road to Damascus and also performed incredible miracles and healings. But this is Paul the leader.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a moment of where he speaks with great gusto. And this is the guy in 2 Corinthians that says, well, you know what? I know, and he uses hyperbole and almost mocking them that I'm not a great speaker like the super apostles, Right. And also he had that reputation of in Acts of where he was the only preacher that preached so long and so boring that a kid fell out the window and died. Now he did go out and resurrect him. That was pretty good.
That's why whenever I do youth camps, I keep everyone on the first floor.
Yeah.
Keep them all on the first floor.
But for him to stand up in this moment and speak courage, and I think this is a moment, Kurt, for our generation to show some courage. And I know COVID has gone on so long. It's gone on too long. And lockdowns and Europe's back into it at the moment. It's just crazy what's going on. I thought the other day just about my grandfather, my mother's father, and he fought in the First World War and was injured in the First World War, was blinded for a short season. And so that's the First World War was 4 years. He lived through the Second World War. That's 5 years, not COVID, 5 years of war, rations, and rations after the war. So there's just a straight 9 years, not counting all the rations, like out of his lifetime affected. And I just go, no wonder they call them the Great Generation.
Yes.
The Great Generation. They're pretty incredible.
Yeah. All right. I want to get to the good news now, because there is one point in this passage that we preached this weekend that actually is good news. And it doesn't sound like good news, but they threw things overboard. They threw the tackle overboard. That's the ropes and pulleys. They threw the cargo overboard. That's how they get paid. And they end up cutting the anchors. It's you don't want to put too much symbolism in it, but it's too powerful to not look at going. They eventually went, hey, listen, our direction, our strategy, we're just going to let the wind blow us.
Yeah.
And they cut the anchors. So what I said on the weekend is, listen, people, the only good news about COVID is that the disruption of this allows you to cancel things. Everyone can go full Bob Goff right now. Bob has been at Bayside a lot of times. He said, every Thursday I quit something. Now is the time, I said, people, walk into your boss, hand him a new job description and say, that's what I'm doing from now on. And they're say, how come you came up with that? And just say COVID and then leave and join them on a Zoom call. I mean, now is the time. So here's my question. In the disruption and chaos of this, and what's changed in your schedule? What have you thrown overboard? What have you done different? Because you can in this season.
It's a great point, Kurt. So you can look at, I lost this or I gained this. And for me, I'm just looking at it and going, we are approaching, and in the next few years, being empty nesters. And that's just freaky. One son married off. Another one came home because he's about to graduate and wasn't worth signing a lease again. So it has just been fun to have him back in the house. I mean, I'm serious. I never thought he would be home again. I thought he would visit us. I didn't know he would stay with us. And that has been fantastic. And then I'm looking at my daughter, who next year will be at college, God willing, vaccines and all of that. She'll be at college. So I just tried to go, how can I use this time and get... So Abigail and I, we're rewatching The Crown because season 4 is coming out next month, everybody. It's God's will.
Happy about that.
Yeah, you got to watch The Crown. And so,
by the way, he's not making this up. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in when I was like, all right, let's close in prayer. I got to go get to The Crown with my daughter.
And it's just, see, having that quality time.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, I won't have that time again.
No.
So this has just been amazing.
Yeah, all your kids are going to have wings. So it's absolutely true. The thing about this whole thing of what can you throw overboard? I think sometimes we've got something in our hands here and God wants to give us something else. But he's like, you gotta let go of that before I can give you this. And a lot of times what we have in our hands is how we worked, or that's their tackle, or what we think will stabilize us, that's the anchors, or what we think will get us paid, that's their cargo. And God's like going, I'm not worried about that stuff at all. Every once in a while, I think, even without a storm, you got to go, Lord, if I let go of this, is there something else that you could have me grab onto? And I'm trying to just keep that positive frame of that. Disruption can be, storms are great clarifiers of priorities.
It's very good.
So when you know this to be true, as a pastor, you get around people that want you to pray for them because they're battling terminal illness. And, sometimes God heals, sometimes people pass. What you learn from people dealing with terminal illness is they always get their priorities right. The view of the end, they start throwing things overboard left and right. And then they start leaning into things left and right. And I think the beauty of a storm is it allows us to go, none of this is going to survive. All of this is going to drown. And now I really clearly know. I know this is, I'm not hanging on to that.
Yeah.
I'm not hanging on. Or a move is that way too. You start thinking, whenever you're going to go, I have to put this in a box and pay a guy to transport it in a truck. Yeah, we don't really need it.
Yeah.
We don't really throw that thing overboard. All right. To my last point, which Haley's already stood up and told me, it says, and I think this is the point. You know, the food thing's interesting. The overboard's interesting. And there's some good in there. But really what happens here is God promises Paul he's going to save him and everyone on board that sticks with him. And then God does it in a way that no one sees. They're trying to run for the shore because, of course, in the Near East in the first century, there are not public pools and swimming lessons. Do you guys have swimming lessons in Ireland?
Oh, of course we do. We live in the rain. We've got to have...
Exactly. Just go outside and it's a swimming lesson. So, you know, people tend to think it's like that. You know, at one point, I think it's the centurion who says, anyone can swim, jump in to the ocean now. And there's crickets because no one can swim. So what God does is their plan doesn't work. They don't make it to shore. They hit the ground. They hit the sandbar. And God breaks the boat up in this beautiful sort of way that God does. The destruction, the disruption creates 276 lifeboats out of the wreckage, and they ride the wreckage into the shore. If you're just going to look at people and pastor them right now, Andrew, and go, listen, I know there's a lot of stress around this election and around this economy and around cultural chaos. I know that there is a tremendous amount of stress around racial reconciliation. I know there's a tremendous amount of stress around how we've handled COVID, haven't handled COVID, how long COVID will last, vaccines, etc. But just keep in mind, in this obstacle, there's an opportunity. How would you pastor them? What should people be looking for in terms of what God's really doing in this time?
Yeah. Well, it was Pastor Rick Warren said it, and he said this a few months ago, but it's really stuck with me.
Stuck with me too.
Yeah. He said, you know, in COVID-19, some people said we're all in the same boat. He said, no, we're not. We're all in the same storm. We're all in the same storm, but people are in different boats. He said some people are in cruisers. They're doing really well through this. Yeah. They're actually making, some people are going, I've made a profit, which, and thank God for that. Yeah. You know, hey, salute you. And don't feel guilty about it. Just share it with everybody. But there's other people, and they're holding on to driftwood. They're just holding on to driftwood. But those people that are holding on to driftwood, we got to commend them. They've still got their faith. They're feeling wet. They're feeling cold, maybe feeling overwhelmed, but they're still holding on to something precious in their life. And these are the moments, let's be honest, Kurt, that you and I have preached about for years. We preached about this in what we now know. We used to think they were tough days, but now we're looking at it going, they were great days. And it's like we heard so many sermons, and now we get to live them. And I want to speak to the people out there that are struggling in this moment, that feel slightly shipwrecked. And it's this, if you're holding on to driftwood, is that crawling counts in the kingdom of God. It really does. It's you may not feel like I'm in my stride and I'm doing, do you know what? If you've still got faith, if you're still holding on to Jesus, you are a conqueror. That's so Jesus wrote to those churches through John, the 7 churches, and he kept on saying to this, to him who overcomes, to her that overcomes. And the word there is Nike. It's like the swoosh. That's where we get the swoosh. That's how someone made millions or billions. And it is to him who is a Nike, to him who is an overcomer. This is really, really, really difficult. And if we think we got it difficult, just go and read Revelation and what those people were experiencing. And it was all about hold on, don't let go, overcome. We have an overcoming faith. You might feel wet, you might feel cold, you might feel adrift, but guess what? You still got your faith. Hold on to it.
That's absolutely right. I really do believe that in the obstacle for those that have the faith to keep their eyes open, there's an opportunity. That there's a surge forward, there's a way forward, but we have to actually keep our eyes open. Paul, there's this critical moment in the story where they haven't thrown the lifeboats away yet. And there's a group that they want to jump ship and take the lifeboats and abandon everyone. And Paul goes, go ahead. You'll die. Those little boats are not going to carry you. The little boats, they're actually the medium-sized boats, and that's where you're going to drown. The big boat's not going to make it. The medium-sized boat's not going to make it. The little piece of wreckage, it's going to navigate it and make it.
That's good.
Stick with it. And I just tell people, listen, keep doing the next right thing. Go to church. Pray. Love your children. The one thing they didn't throw overboard were people. They come to the centurion at one point and say, let's throw the prisoners over. You know how much lighter this ship would be? And the centurion's like, that's not going to save us now. You're just doing that out of spite. You just want to see someone else die before you die. Don't get in that spirit. The centurion literally looks at him and goes, not on my watch. Don't throw anyone overboard, and I don't care how that person votes. I don't care how that person looks. I don't care what that person said on social media, Instagram, or what they did at your birthday party when you were 6. Now's not the time to throw them overboard. Now's the time to open your eyes and go, my plan may not work. God's always got a plan. I was reading this week, penicillin was invented by accident. The scientists that invented it left, came back, and there was mold on his petri dishes. Right. Disney was fired for not being creative enough in his first job. Walt Disney. Every teacher I ever had, Andrew, told me, Kurt, shut up more. You don't even have to finish that story.
Yeah.
In the tragedy, there's a triumph. And it's going to be true for this season too. All right.
Great.
We are going to study the book in Jonah next. Give us, so this weekend. Give us the 3 points this weekend. Can you give us a little preview?
Yeah. Basically what we're going to do an overview of the book, and people sometimes they hear Jonah and they find the story hard to swallow. Oh, sorry. Okay. But listen, it is a fantastic book, and it's a book, I believe, it's a book for our world at this time. It's a book for America, but also really importantly, it's a book for me. And we're going to be talking for 5 weeks about the minor prophet with a major issue. This guy had so many hang-ups and so many issues, but every time I look at Jonah, it's like looking in the mirror. I'm looking at me. So I think people are really going to enjoy this, and every chapter is distinct. 1, 2, 3, 4 tells really exciting parts of his life. It's just not about a runaway guy. It's not just about a big fish. Actually, the fish is such a small thing in the story. It's about the heart of someone that got too religious and how they got back on track.
It's really about trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a difficult thing nowadays. It's difficult to trust. So excellent. We're looking forward to that. Join us on the flip side where we go in a deep dive on Jonah for the next 5 weeks. Get to a Bayside campus this weekend for the overview of the flip side in Jonah. Jonah, learning to trust the plan of God. And also, would you like and share and follow, like and share and follow, like and share and follow. There's someone right now going through a storm, and they need to know that God's got an opportunity in their obstacle. Would you share this with them? Would you just go ahead and right now just click that little link and share that for them? As always, the vision of the flip side is that we not just hear the word of God on the weekends, but we examine it in such a way that it impacts our everyday life. We want to thank you for doing that and encourage you to keep sharing this podcast. God bless you, and we'll see you at a Bayside campus.